Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Fitzwilliams, Forest Supervisor of the White River National Forest. We're here tonight during this session, this Facebook Live session, to give you an update on the Grizzly Creek fire. Normally we would do this in a public meeting and in person, but of course with COVID-19 we have to use the power of the internet and some social media, and we hope this works out for you. Tonight, what we really want to do is introduce you to some of the leadership that's managing the fire and give you a sense of the status, what's currently going on, and a sense of what to expect in the near future. So with me, and I'll reintroduce these folks, but Jared Hone over there on my far left is the current incident commander of the Rocky Mountain Type 2 team. Sheriff Lou Valerio, who many people know, Sheriff of Garfield County. And on my right is Marty Adele, and Marty will be taking over as incident commander of the Type 1 incident command team starting tomorrow. So, listen folks, we know we have a real situation here, and it's serious. This fire is in a really tough spot, and it's really tough to fight, and we know it's causing all of us a lot of consternation and a lot of pain. But what we want to do is be a team and introduce you to the people that are managing this and leading this, and be a team that's as transparent and provide as much information as we possibly can. And you know, tonight and many nights because of COVID-19, we're going to have to do that via the internet. During these difficult times, we'll try to get as much information out as possible. So I'd like to first introduce Jared Hone. And Jared, you've been incident commander of this fire for a day and a half now. And could you give everyone an update of what's the current status, as update as you can give us, and why this fire has been so difficult to fight?
Sure, Scott. So, as many know, the fire started on the 10th, around 1:30. We are currently at 4,800 acres, and right now we have 0% containment. Just a quick up-to-date briefing on what we have. So the north side of the fire, which is Division November, it's really butting up to the Grizzly Trail and the Cutoff Trail, and that's kind of an area where we're trying to keep it to the south of that, using aviation assets and also ground resources. Division Echo, the east side, which is Division Echo, the fire keeps backing down towards I-70. We do have ground resources off of I-70 and some hand crews, and they're being supported with aviation assets as well. Look at the south side of the fire, which is Division Zulu. Unfortunately, the fire jumped I-70 yesterday, pretty late, about 3:30 in the afternoon. We were hoping it wouldn't do that, but it did. And so we're really doing structure assessment and structure protection, primarily looking at the County Road 120. And we're also supporting that with aviation assets and also trying to get overhead crews and overhead in there to try to assess those situations to try to protect some homes. You look at the west side of the fire, which is Division Alpha. This has been an issue for us today. It's been backing down, and currently it is sitting in the bottom of the no-name trail system. We have evacuations off of Highway 70 at the no-name area, but also that puts Glenwood in a pre-evacuation. So a big concern, but as it stands now, we've been able to keep that in no-name trail system with aviation assets and ground resources. So some of the issues and why we're having some issues and concerns with this fire, as we all know, 2018 was a fairly large fire season, specifically in this area, up and down the highways, Interstate 70 corridor. We had numerous large fires. It was a very dry year. It's shadowing the 2018 year. And so that's high, it puts us at a high risk for large fire growth due to the dry conditions. And last year was wet enough. It had a very high grass component that never burned off, which is helping carry the fire. Right now, nationally, we're in a preparedness level 4, which means the allocation of resources are starting to grow very thin, and we're having a lot of large fire activity throughout the nation. So we're having limited resources, specifically aviation assets, which drastically help suppress the fire. So those are some of the real issues we're seeing with the Grizzly Creek fire right now.
So what has been your biggest concerns out on the fire line and where the fire is burning?
So biggest concern is just public safety and firefighter safety. We want to ensure that the public is safe and also the firefighters that are on the ground. We have very steep, rough, rugged terrain, which puts people at risk. There are some areas just on the other side of the Colorado to the south side that are very inaccessible, and that puts firefighters at danger. So our number one concern is ensuring the public safety and our firefighter safety. Then we're also looking at infrastructure and also homes. We want to ensure that we try to do the best we can to protect people's livelihoods, their homes, and that's a very high priority for us as well. And then also, the I-70 corridor is a huge infrastructure program for this area, the community, tourism, trying to get that corridor back open, and also the railroad tracks. So those are our three highest priorities, but for sure public and firefighter safety.
So tomorrow, like I said, tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., we're going to transfer command of the fire over to the Type 1 team. And Marty Adele will be the incident commander there. Marty, I get a lot of questions about what's the difference between Type 1 and Type 2. And why don't you talk a little bit about that, and what does a Type 1 team mean, and what do you bring?
Okay. It's a good question. Basically breaks down to three different things: experience, expertise, and training. Many, if not all, the individuals on our team started as a Type 2, on Type 2 teams, gained experience, additional training, and then experience and expertise on multi and very complex incidents. So when we roll into an area such as this, we've seen many of these types of scenarios. We have the background to start delegating, divvying up the workload, and working with our cooperators and others in the area.
So you've only been here a day, so you don't have a whole, assessment of the fire. But what do you think the priorities will be?
Priorities are a lot what Jared already explained. When we roll into any incident, obviously we're going to get a briefing from the locals that work here every day. The outgoing team has given us a very good package, setting up our infrastructure for us to move forward successfully. But our priorities right off the bat, once again, firefighter and public safety. We are, and that has never changed, nor will it ever change on any incident that we are on. We always want to protect the structures, the people, and the infrastructure in this area, along with our firefighters. Secondly, the I-70 corridor. We recognize the transportation needs, the commerce needs. Opening up that river is very important to not only the community, but to us. We come from areas that have dealt with similar situations, whether we're from Idaho or Montana or Utah or Nevada. We deal with these stuff on our home units. We understand that. Third, the power lines. Power lines, the power sources, the power plants themselves, and the corridors for that energy. Fourth would be the rail line Jared had talked about. And then last but certainly not least is the fire itself, to start suppressing that once we can start getting a handle on what the issues are in this area and start dealing with the safety concerns.
So probably the most common question I get from people in the community is, what can they expect, and when are you going to put out the fire?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about what's the future hold? What can you pass on for expectations for people in the communities?
Before we can really look at what the future is going to hold, we got to look at what the past has held. Jared has very eloquently described the situation currently. We've got live fuel moistures that are at record or historic lows. We've got a considerable amount of dead and down fuel, whether that's timber or the grasses from years past that are very low. Couple that with the fact that the normal precip or rain that we get this time of year that really reduces the fire threat has not materialized whatsoever. And then the possibility of winds and or lightning is always a threat. Couple all all those entities in regards to the current situation, plus, once again, what Jared had talked about, resource allocations. This fire is going to burn actively for a while. I don't like to say any one date, but until we get sizable or measurable rain, precip, and or snow, we are going to have a fire threat to burn.
Yeah, and it's going to be active burn.
Yes, very much so.
I think many of us here and many of the people maybe watching, lived through 2018, and it was a long grind. And I think part of what we want to do tonight is just prepare those expectations for people that this fire is going to be here a while. We're going to work our tails off to put it out, but we're a long ways away from that. So managing an incident like this is a cooperative effort. And it's not that these federal incident management teams come in and take over. What we try to do, and what we always do, is we leverage the resources of every agency that we can work with. And of course, one of the most important is the local government and the local sheriff. So, Sheriff, we've had a few questions about what does pre-evacuation mean, and if you would give us an update on the evacuation status. But first, Jared talked a little bit about pre-evacuation for parts of Glenwood Springs. What does that mean?
So, pre-evacuation is notifying people that we may need to evacuate, giving them the chance to kind of get their things together, to make plans, whether that is, if we pull a trigger, then say, yes, it's time to evacuate, they're ready. They've got their car loaded with what they need. They've decided what's important, what they can live with, what they can live without. Maybe making arrangements ahead of time where you can stay. We have shelter point in Glenwood Springs, but most people arrange, stay in other places. So really pre-evac is just letting people know the next message coming could very well be evacuation and they have to move. So getting them ready to do that.
So current status of evacuation.
Sure. So right now, we've got residents, about 200 residents we evacuated, about 125 homes, and it's in the area of No Name, which is of course on the map where it originated, right here in No Name, and that's both on the north and south side of the river. Everything else is pretty much on the south side of the river, and those are the areas known as Lookout Mountain, Homestead Ranch, Spring Valley Ranch, High Aspen Ranch, Coulter Meadow Subdivision, and Buck Point Drive. And so everything, again, kind of south of the river where it jumped the river yesterday, I believe, and we're concerned about those residents there.
Another question, how are people notified of evacuation?
Great point. There's so many different ways. We do still the old reverse 911 where we can send out messages from we can map an area in our dispatch center and send messages to those phones that are there, those landline phones. So many people now have cell phones, and they can sign up for emergency notification systems. In Eagle County, they have one system. In Garfield County, we have a different system. But that's really the best way, is to get signed up for that, and you can get notifications immediately. We also put out press releases pretty continually during this event, and things on Facebook. I know you guys have Facebook, Sheriff's Office has Facebook, so all the different varieties of both the more common social media type things now, as well as the standard telephone contact.
And between the Sheriff's Department and all the emergency personnel that's come, we'll also be out there telling people.
Yeah, we're actually go door to door.
Okay.
So when we start evacuating people, we'll go door to door, let them know. We have kind of a system where we'll mark a driveway with some paint so we know whether we notified them, and then when it is time to evacuate, who does evacuate, who chooses to stay, and that kind of thing. So we're on top of it. We go face to face with almost everybody.
So what are the biggest public safety concerns you have as sheriff right now?
Wow, there's so many. Right now, what we see every time we have a fire and we shut down a highway, people are always looking for alternative roads to get to where they need to go. And unfortunately, from this area, either to the south or to the north, it's about a 3-hour delay if you're going east to Denver, and obviously west isn't an issue. But what happens is they try to catch some of the smaller roads. So as a result, Independence Pass, which is south and east of here, outside of Aspen, and drops over into on the eastern slope, it's closed down right now because we had semi trucks that exceeded the size limits and that are blocking it. We have other roads that are literally county dirt roads, 4-wheel drive roads that people are trying to get over, and it causes congestion and traffic safety. We actually had a semi truck roll over on one of those roads 2 nights ago because honestly, with mapping systems nowadays and GPS stuff, they don't tell you what kind of road it is, it just shows you an alternative. So we're concerned about that. We're concerned, of course, about, you know, the fire issue and keeping people safe and maintaining the structures and, you know, not letting anybody get hurt. The other thing we see after a period of time, particularly if we have people evacuated, is we see the anxiety building up, the frustration. When do I get to go home? Why don't I get to go home? I don't see the flames, you know. So we have all of the above, and that's really our safety concerns.
Yeah. What should people do in preparing? What's the pre-planning that people should go through?
You know, that's a great question, because so many people start thinking, what's valuable? Do I take pictures of my children? You know, do I leave those behind? Do I take documents? Do I leave those behind? Certainly medications. You know, we tell everybody at least a week's worth of medication, if not more, because we don't know how long you're going to be evacuated, because we don't know what this fire behavior does. Of course, pets and you know, things like that, clothing and the basic essential stuff. People choose to also take those personal items that can't be replaced. That's fine too, as long as they've prepared and have time to do that. When we start evacuating people, that is not the time to start going through old photos of children and documents. So
Or calling a friend right that moment.
Right.
Have that worked out ahead of
yes,
time.
have that worked out ahead of time. Like I said, we do have a shelter Red Cross is managing in Glenwood Springs. It's at their community center. But generally what we often see in these cases is that people will find other places to go, friends, relatives, you know, out of town for a while, but we have that available there. So, yeah.
You know, guys, we have put in some pretty big closures. We've closure areas. We've closed the Coffee Pot Road to the north. We've closed areas to the east, to the west, to the south. And I've gotten some complaints and texts, and we've noticed people pushing the limit a little bit about why the Coffee Pot Road? That's 5 miles from the fire. Why is it so important? We put in those closures for you guys to do your job, and people adhere to them. Give some of the nuts and bolts of that.
Sure. The main reason is safety. It really always hinges on safety. Once again, I'll start with the fire activity and the current conditions and the extreme fire activity that is possible. That could cover that ground rather quickly. Secondarily is just the resources moving up and down that road. We've got hotshot crews, we've got type 2 crews, we've got engines, we've got overhead divisions operations that are going to be up and down those roads. And if anything I've learned, not only from looking at the map, but talking to the sheriff and everybody else, some of these roads are not, you know, very conducive to multiple traffic. We've got a lot of very large rigs, engines that are going up. Passing would be really, just wouldn't happen. And if we needed to get up or out of there in a quick manner, it would definitely be a safety hazard. Secondly, we see on other incidences, people going up there and wanting to see the helicopters and the VLATs and the air tankers. And don't get me wrong, they're awesome, they're incredible, they're fun to watch, they're very exciting. But it just rolls right back into the same thing. We've got people that, one, we are not, can't account for in the potential fire area, as well as possible lockups on roads and stuff like that we'd have to get by on any one time, and these roads are tight. So we really request everybody just stay out of those closure areas as much as possible.
Right. Makes a big difference, and like you said, it's conditions the way they are. A fire can cover so much ground so fast.
Very quickly.
In an area like the Coffee Pot Road, which you'll get familiar with, there is no way we could get people out of there in short order, so we had to do it, you know, well ahead of time, and that's just the way it is. So we do have some time for questions. Do we have some on Facebook that have been posted, and we'll try to get to those, as many as we can.
We have a lot. I think if we could just do, I don't know, Jared, if you'd be the best one to give us kind of an idea of where the fire is right now, as best you can, because a lot of people are asking about different specific spots, like No Name, Glenwood Adventure Spot, Missouri Heights, Dot Zero, Sweetwater, a bunch of these areas. Maybe the sheriff can help as well.
Okay,
Don't speak way up.
yeah, the specific ones I do know. It did breach down, it did back down into the No Name area, to the trail. It did back down, and hasn't breached or done a slope reversal on the trail. And so it has well established into the bottom of the drainage. The other areas hasn't done a lot, it has not moved very far to the north. It's still contained in the cutoff trail system and the Grizzly trail system. To the east, they are keeping it at bay with the ground resources allocated and the aviation. It has started to back down towards I-70, but it hasn't made much progress. The largest progress was to the south, and even that hasn't progressed very far. It's starting to bluff out, and this is fairly accurate on the location, but people that are local to these areas know that there's some big plateaus up on these. It has not made slope reversals on those plateaus to start burning downhill, and so it has kind of hung up in these areas. Talking to the other county, over here we have lifted some pre-evacs, because the primary push to the south is stopped to the southeast, and it's more to the southwest. If that answers some of the questions, a little unfamiliar on some of the local places, but that is the general growth for the fires. Primarily the biggest concern right now that we have, and the reason we put Glenwood on a pre-evac is the no-name trails, to where it has gone to that point, but it has not it hasn't crossed the trigger point to fully put evacuation orders for East Glenwood.
Okay, thank you. And are we calling any containment yet, or still at?
There is no containment at this point. The fires is such a progressive and fast-moving state that there's zero containment.
Okay. And Sheriff, with the reverse 911, can they sign up with a cell phone? They can, correct?
Yes.
And I think your Sheriff's Department put in if you guys would scroll through the comments, there is a link on how you sign up for all of those things in the comments on this right now.
There is, and like I said, we use a different system. They're private systems we utilize in Garfield County that Eagle uses, but you can go to those links. They should be shared out there, and then sign up. It's free, of course, and you can sign up for the type of alerts you want and that kind of thing. So it's a great resource. You can have text messages, emails, telephone calls. They may even allow carrier pigeon, I'm not sure, but the variety of ways to be able to get information out to people, and it's so important because the old call or their landline just doesn't work anymore.
No, people don't have them.
Don't have them or
Don't
don't
have 'em.
answer.
Don't have them.
So I think we also answered a few of the other questions as far as putting links to maps and how to sign up for the alerts and reverse 911 calls. So that's in there. I think the Glenwood Springs mayor requested that. Trying to see where else. There are a lot of questions about why are trucks and trailers allowed on Independence Pass, which they're not allowed. They're just going there anyway. So any suggestions or thoughts on?
Well, it's a moot point now because Independence Pass is closed indefinitely because of that problem. You know, it's a matter of these folks are trying to get somewhere, you're semi-driver, you've got a load to get to, deliveries to be made, all that. So they're looking for alternative routes. The problem is all these routes are clearly signed, particularly Independence Pass. This is 35-foot maximum, you know, narrow road, etc. But apparently they might miss some of those signs at the time. But so they're not allowed. And there's signage to prevent that. And in fact, these truckers that are up there, State Patrol is actually fining them. I think it's about an $1,100 fine if they're up there on that. So yeah, they're not allowed. We prefer that they not. Again, there's a couple of routes around. They're a long way, but there's routes around to the south. There's routes around to the north to get to Denver or wherever they're going on the other side of this.
Okay, thank you. I don't know that anyone wants to hazard a guess on when I-70 will open, but we have had several questions on that. There's a lot of assessment that needs done.
Yes, there's a tremendous amount of assessment that needs to be done. The biggest issue we're dealing with is on that Division Whiskey, as that's coming to the east and northeast, it parallels that road and the amount of debris that falls in there. Once we can find a way, or if we can stop that progression, I think that would go very quickly. But we are in constant communication with the Colorado Department of Transportation, as well as the railroads and the power companies in that to continually evaluate that and see when we can open that up safely.
Okay.
So So there's a question, are there any shelters set up in Spring Valley?
No, all the only one shelter that we have established right now is in Glenwood Springs, and that's at their community center in West Glenwood Springs, well, kind of west central Glenwood Springs. So as far as I know, there's no other shelters in place. We've been encouraging everybody to funnel there for evacuation and relocation.
Trying to see if there are any other questions. Have you guys seen any?
What's the fire threat to Spring Valley area? So that is, Spring Valley is,
Just a little further south, I can see it.
It's here first,
Yeah.
Right there. Okay, so, Jared, I know you've been looking at that, go ahead.
So just right now, that whole Spring Valley area is under an evacuation order. The threat would be if we have significant weather conditions and significant fronts that come in and push the fire to the south.
pre-evacuation.
Or pre-evacuation, excuse me.
Let's get that right.
So it's on pre-evacuation. The concern, of course, is the terrain, fuels, and the infrastructure. That does have quite a ways to go, and there are some natural barriers in between the residents and the fire.
And looking at talking to our operations as well as yours, there's definitely a terrain change as well as a fuel consistency change, which if the fire progresses down that way, it does give us and lend to different operational tactics that we can start looking at to, which may lend to more aggressive attack and tactics.
I should let you know I live in that area.
Okay.
Not that I get special treatment, just let me know if I should go home. Any other questions out there that we got?
So they do want a little bit more information on what does the pre-evac mean, how much time does that give them, and some of that.
You know, as a rule, we'll look at trigger points, where the fire hits, and then we're going to tell people it's time to evacuate. Right? And again, that's a decision really made by these guys. But from our perspective, what we have to do, especially when we're helping people evacuate, is that we want to give at least we try to do 24-hour notice. Try to look at the fire behavior, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and try to assume a 24-hour notice. I can tell you I've been on enough wildfires say we did a 24-hour notice, and 2 hours later we were evacuating people. So it's hard to say, but we're trying to give enough distance between where the fire is and where it might go to let people know, give them a heads up on if they get an evacuation notice, it's time to leave. It's not time to start packing, it's time to leave. So pre-evac is saying, folks, you know, it might come your way. We want to let you know ahead of time. We don't want to surprise you knocking on your door and say, run, get out of there. So take the time, prepare, put together things you need, have a to-go bag, you know, with kids' clothes and again, medicines and things like that available. So if you do have to, you can go. And that's really one of the best things I can tell you about pre-evac, because it's not an exact science, obviously.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. We also had some questions about where exactly is East Glenwood Springs? Where is there a map that shows the evacuation zones? People were confused. Does that include downtown?
The evacuation zone of Glenwood?
Mm-hmm.
No, right now there really isn't anything in the immediate Glenwood area, is there, that we've pre-evac, if that's the question.
It has hit the trigger point. If it does go past no name, then that's the trigger point to do the pre-evacs. Right. And then if it progresses to the next management action point, that's where the evacuation protocols will take place.
I think the question is, does the pre-evacuation order include downtown Glenwood, or is it, if you're on the other side of the freeway and the river, or is it just that north side of the highway?
Best of my knowledge, unless something's changed, is kind of the north side of the highway, and we're looking, because this is kind of backing to the west, maybe the West Glenwood area of town. But right now, the main town itself there's no pre-evac notification.
Primarily on the north side of the highway is what.
But even that, we were talking earlier today about, do we need to do pre-evac in that West Glenwood area, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Sorry, they're coming in faster than I can read them.
That's all right.
Any structure losses in the Spring Valley Ranch area?
Not that I know of.
And how are things in Dotsero? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Dotzero's is fine, that's far east of here, or of the, where the fire is, west of here, but so far, so good.
That's way off the map, it's way over here.
So, what resources do we currently have? Again, that's everything, but do we have the resources we need and are more coming?
So
I'll let you-
currently,
you give us current.
we have roughly 250 resources and on order. There's a significant amount of more resources ordered. We've also placed orders for a substantial amount of heavy equipment between dozers, feller bunchers, and equipment to try to proceed to the north and to the south of the fire. And then we do have adequate aviation assets, but it's a shared aviation asset with other fires in the region.
I know, oh, go ahead. I know whenever a team is ordered, we have a mobilization order that we put in. We put in an order for 18 more crews, multiple strike teams of engines, strike teams, or task force are multiple engines up from 3 to 5, so we're looking at an additional 20 engines, plus other overhead or management type folks, looking at structure protection specialists, a couple more aircraft. I know we put in for some more heavy helicopters and some medium helicopters to be able to move troops as well as gear. So there are several more impending orders out there.
Yeah, just to explain, when we use terms resources, we're talking about people and equipment, I mean, essentially. And so far it's coming in, and as Jared mentioned early, it's picking up nationally, so we've got to get in line a little bit, but it's a high priority, both in the state.
So yeah, the Grizzly Creek Fire is the #1 fire in the nation for allocation resources.
There you
so
go.
That is very helpful for the area and the communities that are affected by it.
One thing we have to understand though, when we put these orders in, a lot of these resources or engine crews or just straight up hotshot crews are coming from all over the nation. So it will take them possibly a day or 2 or 3 to get here. So there is a little bit of a lag.
So I've already gotten a bunch of messages and emails and texts about people ask, what can we do to support the firefighters? And they'll start bringing food and they'll start bringing water, and what advice can you give them about why sometimes that's maybe not so helpful? And what can they do to support firefighters and all emergency personnel?
Well, one thing for our team, especially right now with the COVID and everything else going on right now, we are really trying to limit any kind of donations to the firefighters. We can take care of ourselves, we're self-sufficient, we've got resources to do that. What we recommend is really look holistically at your community. You've got shelters, you've got maybe some different entities that could help throughout the area, maybe some of the people that need to be evac'd. That's where we really do a lot of our push as far as donations and community assistance.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you can do to help, the most important thing right now for all the emergency personnel is let them do their job. Listen to the closures, stay out of areas you shouldn't be. That's probably the most important. And we'll look down the line. I know in 2018 people really, had a real propensity to give, and we're looking at the opportunities. Maybe we'll there is going to be a lot of restoration to be done, for example, and so maybe we can start looking at watershed restoration or funds like that. So stay tuned on that. We have a lot of time, but right now I think the most important thing is let these folks do their job. So any other questions out there? We want to kind of wrap up and not consume all of dinner hour for everyone.
I think we have successfully confused people on what's pre-evac and what's in evacuation.
Okay.
So what exactly do we have under evacuation right now? And then the exact areas under. You need
So
to
the
bump them
areas-
out a little.
The areas that have been evacuated, we've asked people to leave. about 200 people and 125 homes comprised of that 200 people. Okay, and that's No Name, the whole area of No Name, both sides of the river, Aspen Ranch, Coulter Meadow Subdivision, and Buck Point Drive, which are all this area we were talking before, where this south side seems to be pushing. Okay, there's, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have anything evacuated up there, some road closures, but nothing evacuated. And again, the pre-evacuation is giving people a heads up that they might need to evacuate to prepare. Okay, as opposed to when we say evacuate, now it's time to leave. So a notification to prepare, pre-evacuation, get ready, it might happen, and then evacuation, time to go.
Okay.
And maybe what we'll do after this is you guys can really clarify that on Facebook and,
Yes.
and make that really clear.
And some questions on whether or not there's been any structure loss in the No Name Creek area or damage to structures.
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet.
To the best of our knowledge, all the infrastructure is still intact as far as power and water.
And then Cattle Creek and Cottonwood Pass, they're still evacuated, correct?
Yes, yes. In fact, the actual closure area comes from over here at Red Mountain, if I can find it, Red Canyon Road, up to Cattle Creek. So that's all closure. Cattle Creek road's closed with Cotton, because that leads to Cottonwood Pass, which is closed, and all those areas.
See any other questions?
Well, we will try to answer the questions as they come in online. It also helps us as we do this in the future. If we get a bunch of questions tonight after this session, we'll be in better shape to answer them. Folks, we know this is a really, it's a serious situation and it's a burden. It's really a burden for our communities, the economy, our infrastructure, everything. And you know, we're going to be here for a while, and we're going to, you know, this fire is going to be here for a while, and these teams will be here for a while, and we're going to bust our butts, frankly, and work as hard as we can to protect people, to protect property, and eventually put this fire out. So we really appreciate the patience. I think that's a lot of what we ask for right now. This thing's moving quickly, and it's a challenge, and we you know, the support that we've gotten to this date. I want to some shout outs and thank yous early on, before all the teams and personnel from all over the country started to arrive. First responders, the community groups that are helping with food and other things have been phenomenal, and both in Eagle County and Garfield County have just been amazing. But we're in it for the long run, and we've got to kind of wrap our minds around smoke for a while and expectations and things like that. So with that, we're going to close out for tonight. This wasn't easy. We're trying to keep some distance from each other, and at the same time being able to talk clear enough. So we'll keep trying to improve on this format because it's what we have. We can't have big public meetings, and so if there's things that you see as you're watching this that we can improve on, just drop a note and a post, and we'll get to that. So before we close, Jennifer Mislevy. Jennifer's one of our public affairs officers, and she's going to give you an update on future programs that you can tune into.
All right, good evening, everyone. Like you said, my name is Jennifer Mislevy. I'm the Public Information Officer for the incoming Type 1 team, the Great Basin Team 1. We'll continue these sessions. We're going to have a community live meeting every other day. Our next meeting is going to be set for Friday, the 14th, August 14th at 6 p.m. So again, we'll be live like this session on Friday, and we're going to continue those every other day to make sure you guys have the most current and up-to-date information. In addition to that, we're going to be posting a daily operational briefing every morning at 9 p.m. Again, here on the Grizzly Fire Facebook page, you'll be able to see that. So we're going to try to get something consistent and updated throughout the day multiple times to keep you guys apprised of anything that's happening. Again, if you have any questions, please put them on the Facebook page. As also, all the hotline is also open as well. So ask those questions and we'll try to follow those up. Thank you.
And before you go, we got one more note, and maybe it's for Sheriff. We want the clarification that there's not an evacuation of Glenwood right now.
Right, there are no pre-evacuation plans or evacuations of anywhere in Glenwood Springs. Okay, obviously planning, we're looking at if we have to, what we will do, but right now, there are no pre-evacuation plans or evacuations for the city of Glenwood Springs.
Thank you.